tam sahagana praganatam vitam tam sajivam sadvaitam Sadhutam Parijina Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishaka Vikamscha E Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kansha Nagorangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So did you have classes the last 2 weeks? I remember we were discussing that.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, unfortunately, since Vardha Krishna Prabhu had some other engagements, we could not have the sessions both the weeks.
Okay, because I see we're down to 31 participants. It's a little less than usual. So I was wondering if everyone kind of...
Prabhu, actually, we are having our monthly Gita Sandesh program, which is a 18-day session. So some of them are already teaching in that program.
Sure.
And a couple of them message that they're not keeping well, so they won't be able to join.
Okay, all right, no problem. So I wanted to begin this. I thought I had it in my notes, so I'll have to find it. But in chapter 13, yes, okay, I found it. I want to read this because it applies to many of the topics that we're going to be reading. So let me share my screen. And an important statement by Prabhupada. Because there's the reason I'm saying this is because there's be a lot of statements that we're reading that says if you just circumambulate the Lord, you go back to God. Or if you just put on tilak, if you just, all these things, right? And so here Prabhupada writes, in these statements that we're here, in these statements about devotional service, sometimes it may appear that the results have been overestimated, but actually there is no overestimation. Some devotees, as revealed scriptures give evidence, have had immediate results by such association, although this is not possible for all. For example, the Kumaras immediately became devotees simply by smelling the incense in the temple. Vivala Mangala Thakur simply heard about Krishna and then immediately gave up his beautiful girlfriend and started out from Mathura and Vrindavan, where he became a perfect Vaishnava. So these statements are not overestimations, nor are they stories. They are actually facts, but are true for certain devotees and not necessarily apply to all. Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind as we go through these chapters, and specifically, as we're starting the circumambulation. I'm just getting back to there now. So in circumambulating, Prabhupada writes, a person, or actually he's the Hari Bhakti Shuddhodaya says, a person who is circumambulating the deity of Vishnu can counteract the circumambulation of repeated birth and death in this material world. The conditioned soul is circumambulating through repeated births and deaths on account of his material existence, and this can be counteracted simply by circumambulating the deity in the temple. And the real point is that all of these are angas of bhakti, and so we're talking about specifics like circumambulating the temple of Vishnu, but it's also just in general saying this is the power of bhakti, the power of devotional service. And so this is one thing that by doing devotional service, we become free from birth and death. We know that. And so circumambulating is one way to do devotional service. But of course, while we're circumambulating, we shouldn't be thinking about the latest cricket score or something like that. So in other words, it's not just a formula, it's bhakti. So if we're circumambulating the Lord and thinking of him in a devotional mood, that's where the power of circumambulation comes into being. And I did want to read something to you. Unfortunately, I lost some of my notes somehow or other, but I wanted to read something about circumambulation that I saw in a lecture by His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj. So I'll just take a second to find it. Krishna, here we go. Oh, it's not there, it's in the other file. Okay, let's see. Chapter 9, chapter 6, 7. Chapter... Yes, so Giriraj Swami was giving a class, and he said, I have heard that we shouldn't, I had heard, he's talking about his time with Srila Prabhupada, I had heard that we shouldn't circumambulate the deity when the doors to the deity are closed. Have any of you ever heard that? Oh, okay. Pranavallabha Prabhu has. Okay, maybe you have. Okay, so listen to this. It's very sweet. Did you hear that? Well, and he's giving a class. He says people in India know this. So I asked Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada said, yes, we should not. I asked why, and Prabhupada said, listen to this, because when the devotees circumambulate the deity wants to reciprocate with the devotees. But when the doors are closed, the deity can't reciprocate, so he feels frustrated. So such a sweet understanding of the person Krishna in the form of the deity. So that's again my point about all of these things that we're reading about, these 64 angas of bhakti. They're bhakti, they're part of bhakti. So it's not just like, okay, I circumambulated 4 times today, I'm going back to Godhead, we do it in the right devotional mood. And then Prabhupada continues the discussion by talking about Chaturmasya. And Chaturmasya, by the way, I always like to say this when we talk about Chaturmasya, because sometimes, well, not many times, in our busy lives, where maybe we have a job, or maybe we're doing full-time service, and we have our family obligations and prasadam, and sometimes it seems that we're going. And it's good to find a way to take a step back, to take a break. And so sadhus in Chaturmasya, they took 4 months. Usually they're traveling and preaching and doing all those things. 4 months, chuti, not really chuti. Of course, they're performing austerities, they're hearing and chanting, but they're taking a step back from the other 8 months of their busy life. So most of us can't do that for 4 months. We would lose our job, or the temple president would kick us out of the temple or something. But it would be good to examine our life and see, is there a way for me to take a step back, to make sure I'm getting some extra rest, to go into nature, to chant extra rounds, to read more of the Bhagavatam, something that's a little bit of a break from our busy day. And so I always got inspired that in the Vedic culture, that was part of life for the sadhus, but also even for us, there's Ekadashi, right? That we're meant to eat less, lower the bodily necessities. I know some devotees, when they can, they try to arrange in their work to take off the days of Ekadasi, so they, but so we have these things. We have this in our line of bhakti. It's times to step back, and I think we can get some inspiration from that and see what would be practical in our life in that way. And Prabhupada writes at the end, by such circumambulation, one is understood to have seen all the holy places where the Ganges waters is flowing. And by following the regulated principles of Chaturmasya, one can very quickly be raised to the platform of devotional service. So that's also important. So Chaturmasya it's a Vedic process, but unless we connect it with bhakti, it's not in and of itself bhakti, but it can raise us. It can help us come to the platform of bhakti. It's like Varnashram. Varnashram in and of itself is not devotional service, but when we practice Daivi Varnashram for the pleasure of Krishna, it brings us to Krishna's lotus feet. So we said a few things there. Questions, comments on circumambulating the deity? No? Okay. By the way, it's so nice. There are a few devotees who are on video. If you can come on video, that's really nice. It's nice to feel that reciprocation. I know some of you are taking prashadam or, whatever, but thank you for those that just turned it on. I appreciate it very much.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. Sorry, the mic was
yes,
off.
Prabhu.
Prabhu, is there any prescribed number of rounds we should go for circumambulating? Because this 4, 9, these numbers keep.
It's kind of like, when you're offering arti, if your whole consciousness is 4 to the feet, 3 to the body, 2 to the stomach, 3 to the head, 7 around, and you're just counting all the time. There's not much. So that's not the essence of it. I understand 3, and I've sometimes heard 4, but it's funny. I don't know if you ever heard this. Is this something? At least in Vrindavan, I remember, like, if I would say, they're serving prashadam, I'll say, I'll take 3 chapatis. No, I can give you 2. I can give you 4. But if I give you 3, then you're my enemy. You ever heard that?
Yes,
Yeah, I don't know where it comes from. If it's from the Shastra or if it's some, I told you this story before about the cat in the basket, right, at the wedding. I told you that, right? Yeah. So I don't know if it's which way it is, but I've often heard 3 as the right amount. But the main thing is the bhakti. Krishna is not counting. Oh, I don't believe it. Achyuta only did 2. To hell with him. Krishna is Bhava Grahi Janardhan. He takes the essence of our devotional sentiment. That doesn't mean we neglect things when we know what's right and wrong, but it does mean that we try to do things devotionally. But I would usually do 3 because, sometimes I remember I got married in Vrindavan, and what my wife and I did the night of our wedding is we went to all the 7 major temples and took darshan. And in the evening, you can. So we circumambulated each of those 7 deities. It was very nice, actually. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything
Prabhu.
else?
Hare Krishna. No. Thank you.
Anything else? No. Okay. Then Let's carry on. Archana. Now, notice in this chapter, many of the items are somewhat one way or another related to deity worship. And of course, we know the power of deity worship, Archana. Simply by worshiping Krishna, one can easily achieve all the results of heavenly opulence, liberation, supremacy over the planetary systems of the universe, all the opulences of the material world, and the mystic power of performing the yoga system. So again, that's from the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not what the devotee desires, but what it's saying is, these are what most people desire in life. Most, non-devotees desire these things. And you get that and much more by practicing Archana, by practicing deity worship. Right now, I'm staying at a devotee's house here in the Washington area, and they have beautiful Gornitai deities. And the whole house is centered on the deities. It's very nice to see. Rendering service to the Lord. Now, this is also about deity worship. And so specifically, it's about serving the Lord as with opulence as the king is treated. So that's why it says here from the Vishnu Rahasya, any person who can arrange for the service to the Lord in the same way that a king is given service by his attendants is surely elevated to the abode of Krishna after death. And then the next paragraph, the conclusion is that those who are rich men in society should construct beautiful temples and arrange for the worship of Vishnu. So the Lord should be worshipped as a king, in the ancient times, as a king is treated. So that's the idea here. So with opulence and awe and reverence. And then, and stop me if you have any question or comment, please. The next one is singing, and that's a very short point, but singing for the pleasure of Krishna. We all know how powerful that is. Kirtaniya Sada Hari, always chanting Krishna's names. And then Sankirtan, it's, since the last one was about singing, here we're also hearing about Sankirtan can also be discussing Krishna's activities, Krishna's qualities, Krishna's form, Nam, Rup, Guna, Lila. And it says there's a following statement in the Chaitanya Charitamrita: a person who chants the holy name of Krishna once can counteract the resultant actions of more sinful activities than he is able to perform. A sinful person can perform many, many sinful activities, but he is unable to perform so many that they cannot be wiped out by one single uttering of Krishna. That's amazing, isn't it? So I was talking with Jai Patak Maharaj about this last year, because Kartik is coming up soon, and in Bhishma Panchaka, right, there's this statement that if you do it properly, you're relieved of sins for 10,000 lifetimes. And he was saying that's very good. I said, yes, Maharaj, but what about this point? And he said, oh, yes, that's true. Chanting takes care of everything. Like that. So interesting. Just give me 1 second here. I just because my Guru Maharaj just sent me a text message, and last time I said, would you like to say something to the devotees in Bangalore? And he said he would like to, but it's very early in the morning. So I'm just going to ask him. So just give me 1 minute, okay? Okay, I asked him, we'll see. He's quite absorbed during his morning program, and he's still in his morning program, but we'll see. I'll see if he gives a reply. Okay. Yes, so this is how powerful a sinful man can perform many, many sinful activities, but he is unable to perform so many that they cannot be wiped out by one single uttering of Krishna. And it reminded me of the 10th offense against the holy name, to not have complete faith in the chanting of the holy name and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. And that was what I was discussing with His Holiness Jaipataka Maharaj, because I was just saying that these things like Chaturmasya or Bhishma Panchaka, they're wonderful, but we just don't want the devotees to think that they're equal in importance with chanting. That's one point, or that there's some kind of formula. You do this fast during during Bhishma Panchaka, and you offer these 5 kinds of flowers, and you do that thing. I remember where you chant, you put your Brahmin thread on backwards, right? And that thing, and that then automatically, because you have to do all of those things, the bhakti, and of course he agreed with that. So this is our main focus in Kartik. Our main focus anytime is chanting. And this was, have you seen that letter that Prabhupada wrote to Jaipataka Maharaj about this? Let me find it real quickly here. Yes, I'll share my screen, because Maharaj reminded me of this letter that he got. Can you see it? Oh, what happened? Where did it go? Oh, yeah, there it is. You have asked about the specialness of the month of Kartik, and the answer is that it is a special inducement for persons who are not in Krishna consciousness to perform some devotional service. For persons who are doing nothing in Krishna consciousness, it is an indirect inducement to take to devotional service in earnest seriousness every moment in Kartik. In this connection, there is a good example that sometimes a store gives a special concession to attract new customers. But for those who are already customers, there is no need for a special sale. They will purchase at any cost if they know the important value of the goods. Similarly, those who are pure devotees do not aspire for any concession, and out of spontaneous love, try to engage themselves in devotional service 24 hours each day, 365 days every year, without any stoppage. Srila Prabhupada letter to Jaipataka Maharaj, 1969. Just give me a second here, because I got a reply. Once.
I request everybody to switch on their cameras in case, Gurujan Prabhu is coming online to receive him.
He said that he can't make it. He's still absorbed in his sadhana, but he said, because he visited Bangalore, right? At some point, did you meet him at some point? I think he said he went there at some point.
I don't think anyone from this group has met Prabhu. I think in very early days he had probably visited.
Acha. Anyway, he said he offered his respects to everyone and encourages everyone to study nectar of devotion. But it's really when he's like in his morning program, he's Vyavasayat Kabud here. Okay, but so a very interesting letter to Jaipataka Maharaj, isn't it? Now that doesn't mean we don't care about Kartik or any of these details, because Prabhupada himself in 1974, 72, practiced, went to Vrindavan and did a Kartik Vrat there in Vrindavan. Now he wasn't fasting, but he was teaching nectar of devotion actually every day in the Radha Damodar temple. I guess it must have been then, well, it could have been 72 or 74, I can't remember. And so these things are there, but I just always like to remind devotees that our main thing, chanting Hare Krishna, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, deity worship, associating with devotees, taking prasadam, tulsi worship, those are our main things. And these other things are nice to accompany that, but always keep the main thing the main thing. Does that make sense? Yes. So any questions, comments on this last point about, actually, let me finish the Sankirtan. So that was about chanting. And Prabhupada then goes on, it's 2 paragraphs later. There are many songs about the Lord's activities. For example, there is the Brahma Sanghita sung by Lord Brahma, Narada Pancharaktra sung by Narada Muni, and Srimad Bhagavatam sung by Sukadeva Goswami. Isn't that nice the way he says they're sung? If these songs are heard by any person, he can easily get out of the clutches of material contamination. There should be no difficulty in hearing these songs of God. They are coming down from many, many millions of years ago, and people are still taking advantage of them. So why at this time should one not, so this is a lesson to us. So why at this time should one not take full advantage and thus become liberated? And the last sentence, it is indicated here that chanting about and glorifying the Lord is the ultimate activity of the living entity. And one thing that I've been inspired to read lately is, I've just been going through the English to Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Sharanagati. And it's so inspiring because it's so full of bhakti, and it talks about the 6 parts of Sharanagati, accepting things favorable, rejecting things unfavorable, thinking of Krishna as our maintainer, thinking of Krishna as our protector, being meek and humble, and being a soul surrendered to Krishna. And I found it, I felt a little sincerity coming from my heart by associating with Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's sincerity. Because it's so, it's just overflowing with his sincerity towards Krishna, overflowing. So anything on singing or Sankirtan?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. One question I have.
Yes, Prabhu.
What will be the difference between singing and Sankirtan?
Yeah, good question. I mean, it could be singing is, to yourself, and Sankirtan is with many, many people.
Okay.
Sankirtan, yeah. Like that. Yes, and yes, we love Sankirtan. It's been hard sometimes during COVID. You can't get together with others and do that so easily. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, a question around deity worship.
Yes.
And we all know the importance of chanting the name. And so when it comes to these 2 activities, the chanting versus deity service, which should take priority, or because
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, so as we hear that, in Satyuga, it was about meditation, then it was about yajnas, and we say in Kali Yuga, it is chanting. And so it's the thing between the deity worship and chanting, which should take the priority.
Both. Well, there's a few things to say. Srila Jiva Goswami says that deity worship should always be accompanied by chanting. And so sometimes it's nice when you see the pujaris on the altar, they'll be playing a kirtan of Prabhupada or something like that as they're addressing the deities. And also there's so many different mantras that we're chanting when we're worshiping the deity, which is a kind of chanting, right? But Prabhupada, he encouraged householders, especially, to do deity worship, and he talked about like a train track. You have the two parts of a train track. So you have the Pancharatriki Vidhi and the Bhagavat Vidhi, and they complement each other. Because when we have deities, there's a schedule. You can't sleep until 10 o'clock and then say, okay, they don't, worship the deity, right? Even our home deities, we may not have, as strict as at the temple, but still there's some regulation there, right? And you have to be clean if you're going to worship the deity, right? You have to take bath, put on clean cloth. So these are all things that are anukul, that are favorable to bhakti. So that's the Pancharatriki side. And then the Bhagavat side is the Srimad Bhagavatam, chanting Hare Krishna, and they complement each other very nicely. So it's to just do the Bhagavat is in one sense the goal, but we often need the purification of the Pancharatriki. It's very it's very good. It keeps us regulated. We know, I can't take prasadam yet. We didn't offer the bhoga to the deities, right? And things like that. So it keeps us. It's very helpful, and we develop that understanding that God is a person, right? By worshiping the deity, and we feel reciprocation with the deity as we're serving them, and that inspires us then to chant. So they complement each other, and it's like an upward spiral. They both help each other. Is that okay, Rasa Sindhu Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
We
Prabhu, there are a
often
few
like to
questions on chat.
Oh, okay. I'll look at that in a second, Achyuta Prabhu. We often kind of like to think, which is better and higher and lower. And, spiritual life isn't always like that. I find myself, I've been trying to catch myself using less comparative language, right? Instead of saying, so-and-so is the best kirtan leader. Instead of saying that, and then somebody could disagree. No, he's not the best. He's the best. I'd say so-and-so is a really good kirtan leader. So trying to do less of this comparison. Now we do have comparisons in the Shastra, like we say, there's perfect, more perfect, and most perfect, right? We see that, even or we studied the different levels of perfectness in in Vrindavan. Remember in Nectar Devotion that there's Vaikuntha, and then there's Govardhan, and there's Radhakund. But still, I think as a general, sometimes it's better to just say how wonderful someone is instead of comparing them to someone else. Right. Okay, let's look at the. Thank you, Achyuta Prabhu, for reminding me about the chat. So we already answered Sadanand and Navina Gopika Mataji's between deity worship and preaching priority. Well, if priority is preaching, that is the essence. So if it's sometimes a choice in this particular situation, that may be one thing. But like we said before, they really complement one another. In other words, Prabhupada would sometimes allow for lesser standards so that the preaching can go on. And also I was just reading today, because someone was someone was talking to me about, I'm sorry about the subject matter, but how we have to avoid any contact with women when they're having their, monthly situation, right? And so, maybe I'm spelling it wrong. Man. Anyway, so I won't find the exact quote, but I remembered. Well, Prabhupada said something about that. So yes, in the Prabhupada said in the Smarta Vidhi, it's totally true. You're not supposed to, they're not supposed to cook. They're not supposed to do this. They're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to touch them during that period. And I've had Matajis tell me, yes, it's great. That your body needs a break, and if you can just relax during that time, it's actually helpful. But I did see this letter that Prabhupada said, yes, the Smarta Vidhi. No, he was talking about women cooking, being pujaris and cooking for the deities. And he said, but the Goswami Vidhi, they're allowed to. But he said, although if we can avoid, that's better. But the main thing is the service to the deity must go on. So I thought that was just interesting that he made the distinction between Smarta Vidhi and Goswami Vidhi. And Goswami Vidhi was going more towards the essence that the service had to go on. The deities can't starve because Mataji is in that part of her month or something like that. So we're we try to have very high standards of cleanliness and everything, and we also have this this mood of the Goswamis, to do the needful, and bhakti is the most important thing. And then Sadhanand and Navina Gopika Mataji, is there a restriction for Matajis to perform kirtan in the temples? Well, it may be different in different places. I know, for example, in Vrindavan, Matajis wanted to also do the 24-hour kirtan. So now they do it, but they do it in the samadhi. Well, of course they can join the men's kirtan in the temple room, but they don't. I don't think, I haven't been in Vrindavan in many years, but I don't think they lead there. So that was how Panchagoda Prabhu worked that out. He's the temple president there. He obviously, as you can figure, in the West, it's Mataji's lead kirtans all the time. And of course, Prabhupada had Jamuna Mataji lead kirtans at Pandal programs in India. And also we play her, we have her singing every single day in every temple all over the world. But I wouldn't want to get into ISKCON management discussion right now, because I don't know, there may be different standards in different zones, different GBCs, different temple presidents. So obviously there's not a blanket restriction all over the world, because it happens in places, but I don't know what the standard is in ISKCON Bangalore or elsewhere. Is any comments or questions on some of the points I just made? No.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Then
Yes, Manikandam. Yes.
Prabhu, as per that Bhagavad Gita, we are a soul, not a body.
Correct.
But that most of these things, it's around the bodily things only.
Correct.
So that body, we have to use it we have to carry our Atma for the proper the devotional service. That is the only thing. Then where these things and all comes, Prabhu, that monthly period things and all it comes. These are the bodily things, Prabhu.
Well, there some of them are mentioned in different shastras, and as I mentioned, they're not so much super important in the bhakti shastras. By at least that statement by Prabhupada kind of indicates that. But it's a very good question, because we have, on one hand, we have what you just said, right? That we are not this body, and etc. And then we also have the social system that Krishna created. He himself says, Chatur Varnyam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasai. He says, I created Varnashram. It wasn't, it didn't come, And in Varnashram, what you find is a division of labor, is a nice way to put it. Not because spiritually no one's higher, no one's lower, everyone's spirit soul. Yet there's division of labor. And if you study the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 5, Rishabdev's teachings, he's very much, he's telling his sons, you all accept Bharat, because this is how society is going to run smoothly. And it goes on like that. So there are differences. I don't see too many men who can become pregnant, for example. Right. So there are some. So we have this interesting situation where we accept that there are differences on the material platform. Right. And not but everyone ultimately is spirit soul. And so in just like, for example, in Varnashrama, so some devotees want to see Varnashrama as what you see in the traditional shastras. For example, there's Stri Dharma, maybe you've heard of that, and particular duties for women, particular duties for men, particular duties for Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Sudras, etc. And then there's also devotees who say, yes, we want to establish Varnashram, but we're not getting so much into those details of Sri Dharma and things like that, but just looking at the essence, which is engaging people according to their propensities and some division of labor. So I know a temple president in North America who feels that they are practicing Varnashram. So they don't have, who's a Brahmin, who's a this or that, but they're engaging the devotees at the temple according to their propensity. And there is a division of labor. Some are preachers, some are pujaris, some are cooks, some are people who clean the temple. And they say that they're taking the essence of Varnashram. And I think there's some devotees who would say, no, bogus. You have the details are there, Sri Dharma, and Brahmins have to be like this. And Prabhupada said Varnashram college. So those kind of debates will probably go on till time immemorial. But Prabhupada also said that those differences of opinion should be seen as spiritual, not material. So there can be different opinions, and they can both be bona fide. I don't know if this is helping at all with your question, because it's a very big question. But just like, for example, I may be spirit soul, I'm not my body, but when I'm at the airport and I need to use the restroom, I want to make sure I go to the men's one and not go to the women's one, and say, well, it doesn't matter, I'm spirit soul, right? So there are some differences, but the essence of Varnashram, well, I shouldn't say the essence. One of the most important things is to respect everyone. That's Vaishnava. Trinada Pisunichena, Tarora Pisahishna, Amanina Manadena, Kirtaniya Sadahari.
Thank
So,
you, Prabhu.
Prabhu, is that all right?
Yes, Prabhu. Then thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Okay. We're talking about some sensitive topics today, but I hope you're satisfied with the way we're discussing them. I'm saying that to everyone. So far, Rasa Sindhu, Vihari Prabhu hasn't, taken me off Zoom.
Okay.
Let's look at, and then before that, Mathurapati and Parabhakti have asked, is singing Vaishnava songs, some kirtan. Especially if it's with more than one person, yes. But we can also sing Vaishnava songs, just ourselves. It's wonderful. Prabhupada would sometimes do that, just open up the harmonium and just start singing a bhajan. And we're so fortunate. Narottama Das Thakur's bhajans, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's bhajans, they're just, like I say, they're full of bhakti. They're full of, Prabhupada said that Narottama Das Thakur's songs are written in very simple Bengali, but they are far better than the Vedic hymns because they give the essence of bhakti. So like I said, right now I'm getting very inspired by reading Sharanagati, studying it. It's just very, very sweet. Okay, let us continue. Well, the next one is japa. And of course, japa we know is quiet, or more quiet chanting of Krishna's holy names. And Prabhupada has written much about japa, and I think we've talked about this before. I know 3 very good sources of inspiration for japa. Mahatma Prabhu has a small book on japa affirmations. Sachinandan Maharaj has written a beautiful book on the living name. And Burijan Prabhu has written a beautiful book called Japa. And all 3 of them are, I often will read a little bit in between rounds from one of those books and find it helps me focus like that. And yeah, japa is so important, and our mind doesn't like japa. Our material mind, it would rather be, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram, what's going on, checking our phone, or, cleaning the house as we're chanting japa, or, whatever. But the secret to success, at least in the beginning stages, is just not having any distractions, having a nice, clean, sattvic place where we chant, and really trying to keep the mind from going into the future, which it usually does, or lament about the past, but just hear the holy name and not worry about, oh my gosh, I still have 4 more rounds. We get into a counting thing with our mind, or we start thinking of all the things we have to do during the day. All these different distractions, because the last offense is pramada, right? Which means to not be attentive while chanting. And it's said that from inattentive japa, all the other 10 offenses are cultivated, right? So if we really want to change our life in a very positive way, we can start with our japa. And Krishna's very kind, even if we've chanted terrible rounds for the last 10 years, if we start fresh. And it's also nice to try to get up early so that it's easier to chant. I remember, preaching sometimes in India was so hard because people would invite me to their home for prasadam or for, and they eat at 10 o'clock at night, and it's that's when they start eating. I'm like, what? It's terrible for your health. No. And Srila Prabhupada once said, a good morning program begins the night before. So ideally, our main meal should be in the middle of the day. Even Ayurveda says that. Right? And then something light at night, maybe some garam doodh, some hot milk, and something light, maybe puff rice, things like that, and it makes it much easier to get up in the next morning and to be fresh and clear thinking. And also try to avoid sour things after lunch, dahi, yogurt and achar and things like that. It's better to avoid those in the evening. And sweets also not so good in the evening. So any questions, comments about japa?
There's one in the chat, Prabhu.
I see it. Hare Krishna Prabhu, just curious to know about what is the difference between the chanting start with Hare Krishna and start with Hare Rama. The main difference is this is what our acharyas, this is how Prabhupada answered this. This is what our acharyas have given us. Because someone asked Prabhupada, well, if there's no offense in chanting the Panchatattva mantra, why don't we just chant the Panchatattva mantra all the time? Right? This is how our minds think. And Prabhupada's answer was, our acharyas have taught us to chant Hare Krishna. So that's a simple answer, Manikandan Prabhu, to that.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Prabhu,
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes, I haven't heard you all day so far, Ramkandan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
And
Prabhu,
Ram Krishna Prabhu.
while chanting or while we perform our japa, many a times as a devotee of a temple, so our mind is, occupied with sometimes various activities associated with rendering of service in the temple.
Yes.
Sometimes
Yes.
unrelated also, both are there. I don't say always I'm thinking of, sometimes unrelated things also. But while we are thinking about the rendering of various services in the temple associated with the activity associated with that, is it offensive chanting, Prabhu, or also rather?
It's nice to be thinking about devotional service, but really japa is our time to just be with Krishna. And I don't know, sometimes I've, in the past I would chant and think, naturally I'd start that, something would come to my mind about some service that needs to be done. And I'll think, oh, I don't want to forget this. I better write it down. And then I'd have a whole list,
Yes.
sometimes during the japa period. And then I look at the list and I say, that wasn't that important to write all that down. So I think we should have the faith. It says in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Matat Smriti Gyanam Apohanam Cha, that Krishna gives us remembrance. If we just focus on being with Krishna in his holy name, whatever we want to remember about some service that we want to do after japa, Krishna will remind us. So really the best thing, if it's possible, is to just focus on the holy name. It's very hard because we're not used to sattva gun.
Yes, Prabhu.
We're used to our mind racing and racing and racing. And then when we tell the mind, okay, all we want to do is hear Krishna's name, the mind says, what? You're going to spend 2 hours just hearing Krishna's name? You can multitask. You can get so much more done. That's how, the mind thinks. So, but when we do it, what's so interesting, Ram Krishna Prabhu, is when we do it, we get some realization. Krishna reciprocates. Oh, this is why everyone says chanting Hare Krishna is so nice. But then the next day, the mind says, okay, it may have been good yesterday, but now we have so many things to do today. But so this is sadhana, this is practice to try to simplify the mind. When the mind calms down and gets in the mode of goodness, you really start seeing things clearly, and you do that during japa, you really start feeling Krishna's presence, which is really what we want in our life, right? if in Ramakrishna Prabhu, if we're feeling Krishna's presence and all those different services that we have to do after our japa is done, it goes so much more smoothly.
Yes, Prabhu.
TK?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu.
All right.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, let us carry on. Submission. So this is these are very high level, advanced levels of prayers that can be offered to the Lord. 3 of them are mentioned. Very feelingly offering prayers, submitting oneself humbly, and desiring some perfectional stage. And there's some very beautiful points here. When one realizes something of his, well, I won't read that one. Let's just read the next. So the Padma Purana has this beautiful statement that just, it's so natural for young boys and young girls to be attracted to each other and to be thinking of each other. So the devotee is praying, when will I be naturally attracted to you, Krishna, in the same way that other people are attracted to boys and girls in this world? Right? I can remember the first time I really liked a girl. I was probably 16, 17 years old. And I was working in my mother's law firm after school, just for a few hours. And I can remember I was just, doing menial labor. I was filing things away. And I was filing things and I was always thinking of her. It was like, I was my first infatuation. Luckily, I became a brahmachari soon after that. So I didn't have to go through that suffering for a long time. But that gave me such an impression of this verse, right? Because I was doing my filing, but I wasn't really, my mind wasn't so much on the filing, it was on her. So, and that was such a natural thing for a young man to think like that. So what if I could be like that to Krishna? What if I could be like that to Krishna? How wonderful that would be, right? So this is the devotee's prayer here. And Prabhupada says, without any training, there is a natural attraction due to sex impulse. This is a material example, but the devotee is praying that he may develop a similar spontaneous attachment for the Supreme Lord. So so it was spontaneous. I didn't have to read any books about this or that or anything. It was just a spontaneous thinking of her. So that's what we want. We want to have this natural attraction for Krishna. And it starts with good japa. And I'm just going to read the last paragraph because it's so beautiful. In other words, one should learn how to cry for the Lord. One should learn this small technique, and he should be very eager and actually cry to be engaged in some particular type of service. This is called lolyam, and such tears are the price for the highest perfection. Now that doesn't mean you literally have to have tears coming through, but the idea of begging for Krishna's mercy. If one develops this lolyam, or excessive eagerness for meeting and serving the Lord in a particular way, that is the price to enter into the kingdom of God. Otherwise, there is no material calculation for the value of the ticket by which one can enter the kingdom of God. The only price for such entrance is this lolyam lalalasa mayi, or desire for great eagerness. Now, although this is very exalted prayers, it's still kind of under the category of us creating our own prayers. And the next one is reciting notable prayers. And Prabhupada writes that in the Bhagavatam, there are hundreds of prayers to the Lord. So a devotee should select some of these prayers for his recitation. there's what is it? It's Madhya Lila 2233, I believe. Oh yes, so it reads, well, I guess I'll share my screen so you can see it. It's a very beautiful statement. One is immediately freed from the clutches of Maya if he seriously and sincerely says, "My dear Lord Krishna, although I have forgotten you for so many long years in the material world, today I am surrendering unto you. I am your sincere and serious servant. Please engage me in your service." Very nice, right? So, so we can say our individual prayers to the Lord. There's nothing wrong with that. We can, talk to the Lord in that sense, go to the deities and offer our prayers. And we can recite prayers of we find in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, in Queen Kunti's prayers are very special. Vritrasura's prayers are amazing. There's many beautiful prayers. And like I said, Narottama Das Thakur, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Prabhupada's prayer on the Jaladuta. And when he arrived in Boston Harbor, very, very beautiful, powerful. One thing I really liked was when Prabhupada said that, he had his 2 heart attacks and this and that. And he said, the ocean is a little smoother today, but my only solace is the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So that was his solace. So when we're like that, our only solace is our japa, our only solace is the Bhagavatam or the Chaitanya Charitamrita or the Bhagavad Gita, we know we're making some really good advancement. Okay, so the point here, the practical point is 2 things. We can offer our own prayers and make prayers that inspire us from great acharyas or from the Shastra. Okay. Sumitra Gopal Prabhu has written, in general, we feel that we are done for the day once we complete our 16 rounds. Is it that we don't have taste, Prabhuji? Well, yes, if we really had taste, someone would have to, our wife or husband would have to stop us. Prabhu, you have to take, it's time for prasadam. You can't just always chant. Right? But, doing our prescribed number of rounds is good. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, encouraged that. And yes, it's a sign that we're still on the platform of Vaidhi Bhakti. Remember these from chapter 2 to chapter 14 of Nectar Devotion is Vaidhi Bhakti. I don't know if you remember when we talked about that. And spontaneous bhakti is mentioned in 15, 6, and 16. So we want to come to that level. And so how to do that is your question. Well, one thing is association, right? We probably a lot of you, because COVID and this and that, you're getting a lot of association by hearing from your Guru Maharaj or from Srila Prabhupada, a recording or something like that. You're listening to pravachans and things. That's one thing. But it's also said to associate with peers who are a little more advanced than you. That's very powerful association. But the idea is that you get inspired. Krishna consciousness is caught as much as it's taught. And so you get inspired by seeing the example of someone who has more taste than we have. And then we are really careful, if you remember from Nectar Instruction, to avoid niyamagraha, just going through shnik, shnik, giddy, giddy, resh, shnik, shnik, giddy, giddy, resh, 15, 16 rounds, plus. But really trying to do our activities with bhakti and consciously doing our activities. And of course, avoiding offenses. We could give a lecture for 3 hours on this question of yours, but those are three. If we could do those three, we're great, right? We attentive, devotional japa and devotional throughout the day. Another thing that's mentioned, actually what's mentioned in the Bhagavatam in the second chapter of the first canto is by rendering service to devotees. One gets Vasudeva Kata Ruchi. Ruchi means taste. One gets a taste by rendering service to devotees. I think that's 1 to 15 or 16, I think. Yes, 16. So let's look at that verse. It's such an important verse. Shushrisho Shadadhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Syanmahat Sevaya Vipra Punya Tirtha Ishevanat. O twice born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely free from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity or taste for hearing the messages of Vasudeva. And we can include Vaishnavas in general in that category, because when you serve, let's say you're serving a new devotee, but your Guru Maharaj and Prabhupada are very pleased with you doing that. So you're also serving them by serving that person who may be just coming to Krishna consciousness. Okay, I'm glad you're satisfied, Sumitra Gopal Prabhu. If you're happy, I'm happy. Okay, shall we carry on? Partaking of prasad, everyone's favorite topic. So again, like everything else, we can say Sharira Vijja Chandriya Tekal Dev Sagari Tamadi Divide Hare Krishna. Right? Or we can really try to meditate on what that meaning is and honor prasadam, honor it, rather than just shovel it into our mouth. Honor it and relish it and have gratitude to Krishna for providing. Therefore, let us, the English goes, therefore, let us take this prasadam to our full satisfaction. And in doing so, glorify Shri Shri Radha and Krishna, and in love, call for the help of Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. Premi Deko Chaitanya Nitai. It says here that we generally don't take prasad in front of the deity. There is one exception: you can take Mahaprasadam. If someone gives you Mahaprasadam in the temple room, you can take it. But obviously a meal we generally don't take in front of the deities. And then similarly about drinking Charanamrita, the last sentence says, in the temple, it is the custom that the Charanamrita is kept in a big pot. The devotees who come to the visit and offer respects to the deity take 3 drops of Charanamrita very submissively. You see, again, he doesn't just say take 3 drops and think about the cricket match or the latest politics. Take 3 drops very submissively and feel themselves happy in transcendental bliss. Anything on prasad or Charanamrita? Any questions, comments? Okay. Now, smelling the incense and flowers offered to the deity. Yes, it's purifying. Prabhupada writes, any devotee coming into the temple should always offer something to the deity, fruit, flowers, incense, etc. If one cannot offer anything in cash, something else must be offered. In India, the system is that all the ladies and gentlemen who come in the morning to visit the temple bring so many things. Even one morsel of rice or one morsel of flour can be offered. It is a regulated principle that one should not go to see a saintly person or the deity in the temple without any offering. In the old days, we used to have a pot of rice, uncooked rice, at the entrance to the temple, and devotees would take a few grains, and then there would be a pot in front of the deities and put that there just so they could follow this. Because, in temple devotees, it's not so easy. They're going to see the deity many times during the day, and, but for those of us who don't visit the temple every day, it is a good thing. Either whether you're putting rupees in the hundi or bringing something, it's good to bring something for the Lord. And flower garlands, I think we talked about this before. We should wear the flower garlands. In India, you go to all these functions, and somebody garlands the prime, the home minister or this or that, and what does he do in about 3 seconds? Takes it off, puts it on the dais, right? We see that everywhere. But for us, if it's Mahaprasadam, if it was worn by Srimati Radharani or by Krishna, we want to keep it on as long as possible. Right? It's Mahaprasadam, or offer it to another Vaishnava or Vaishnavi. But we're not like the politicians taking. You get these big, you've seen, I'm sure you've all seen this many times, right? You go to the functions, like big garlands. Anything on garlands or incense? And there's a question here. We can take, yes, of course you can take Charnamrita in front of the deities, yes. Can we take Charnamrita during Ekadasi? Yeah, I don't think there's grains or beans in usually they add some yogurt and sometimes some chini, some sugar, right? Is it in Bangalore, same? Right? So there's nothing wrong with yogurt and sugar and water on the Ekadasi. Even if you're doing a nirjal, my understanding is taking Charnamrita is still okay for nirjal. I hope that's helpful. Oh, that was the question you asked. That's my understanding. Remember, you're only taking 3 drops, not like, okay, it's nirjal. Right? No, or maybe you take 1 drop even on nirjal, Yes, is there a question? Oh. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhu.
This Madhurapati. Prabhuji,
Yes.
when we take Charnamrut, after taking Charnamrut, we are not supposed to wash our mouth. Is that correct, Prabhu?
Usually there's most temples I see, they have another pot in a receptacle. I think it's okay. That's what I've seen in temples that you visited. Have you also seen like that? There's every temple I've ever been to, Juhu, this, that, they give you Charnamrita and then they have someone, and sometimes for the senior devotees, they have a towel also.
That is,
Prabhu,
yeah.
I think the question is the mouth.
Mouth, Prabhuji. I'm asking. about the
Madhurapati
mouth.
Prabhu is asking about the mouth.
I
No,
heard somewhere. Yeah, how to understand this, Prabhuji?
Well, I guess the point is that it's not contaminated in any way by taking Charnamrita. I don't know. And also sometimes, you can even, I don't know. That's beyond my my pay grade.
Okay.
like that. I haven't heard anything about that, but has anyone else heard something about this? I'm trying to think if I've ever seen senior. I never really focused on senior devotees washing their mouth after trying to. It's usually what hasn't been my focus, but if I get the answer, I'll let you know.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Touching the deity. So here, Prabhupada is saying that only Brahmins can touch the deity, right? And then he starts mentioning Gandhi, that he was upset with that kind of system, basically hereditary system, and Prabhupada says that people who are unclean habits, they're prohibited naturally from touching the deity, but anyone can be elevated, he says, to the highest grade of devotional service by association with pure devotees. A man born in any family is not barred, but he must be cleansed. That cleansing process must be adopted. Gandhi wanted to make them clean simply by stamping them with a fictitious name, Harijana, children of God. And so there was a great tug of war between the temple owners and Gandhi's followers. But anyway, the present law is the law of all scripture, that if anyone is purified, he can enter into the temple. Actually, that is the position. Only one who is properly initiated, who is properly following the rules and regulations, can enter and touch the deity, not all. And one who touches the body of the deity following such regulated principles is immediately delivered from the contamination of material sins, and all of his desires become fulfilled without delay. So anyone can do it, anyone can touch the Lord as long as they're purified. It doesn't matter their birth, but they have to become purified. That's Prabhupada is pointing out. That's what Gandhi didn't explain. He just said just by being in a lower caste, we should make them Harijanas. But Prabhupada said, no, we can make, but they have to qualify themselves. Not just they don't do anything, right? But the same with Brahmins. You're born in a Brahmin family, you may have the worst qualities in the world. So even a Brahmana has to purify them. A person born in a Brahmin family has to purify themselves so they can touch the deity. Any questions or comments on that point?
Prabhu, in our ISKCON culture also, we hear that devotees who do deity services should be Brahminical initiated, not just Harinam Techa.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a mandate.
Yes, because the idea is that they've gone through, Prabhupada would sometimes say, first initiation, we give out freely. It's giving everyone a chance to chant Hare Krishna. Second initiation means they really become made spiritual advancement. They know Shastra, they're clean, etc. And then they can cook or worship the deity. Yeah. Not everyone has to be second. You don't have to be second initiated to go back to Godhead. As we just read a few minutes ago, right? The holy name alone is sufficient. Okay, let's see. Okay, we have 2 more and we have 4 more minutes. So seeing the deity. And then Prabhupada writes that even an ordinary person who goes to Vrindavan out of inquisitiveness and by chance sees the temple, especially that of Govinda Dev, even if he is not elevated to the spiritual kingdom, is still assured promotion to the higher planetary systems. This means that simply by visiting the deity of Govinda in Vrindavan, one becomes highly elevated in pious life. So again, the power of bhakti. And then the last one, observing the arti as celebrations of the Lord. In the Skanda Purana, there's the following descriptions of the result of seeing arti, or of the deity. If anyone sees the face of the Lord while our tika is going on, he can be relieved from all sinful reactions coming from many, many thousands and millions of years past. He is even excused from the killing of Ramana or similar prohibited behavior. So again, all devotional service has incredible potency. Incredible potency. So we didn't get a chance to go through the homework tonight, go through those fill in the blanks. But it's pretty clear what we're going to study next week, chapter 10. It's a very beautiful chapter. And anything, Achyuta Prabhu or Rasa Sindhu Prabhu, that we need to talk about, practical matters? Anything?
No, Prabhu, nothing else. There's some announcement relating to assignment and test. I will talk after this.
Okay. Well, it's so nice to be back with all of you. I'm feeling very, very enlivened.
Same here, Prabhu, likewise. And I think a lot of devotees have been
Thank you.
writing to me one-on-one that they're feeling the void of these 2 weeks of not having sessions.
Yeah, yes, Prabhuji, we felt a kind of viraha from you.
So I'm feeling the same way. So very good. So we will look forward to hearing about hearing, and when you read it, take special attention to the second part of this chapter 10, expecting the Lord's mercy. Because Prabhupada says about the verse that he quotes, this statement of Srimad Bhagavatam should be for the guide of all devotees. It's a very important section. So we'll see you next week, Krishna willing. Hare Krishna, all glory to
Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Vanchakalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhubhye nanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo. Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhus and Matajis. So we have had some development on the assignments. So we'll be resuming our homework assignments from this week. I think practically on NOD we have had just probably 1 or 2 assignments in the beginning. But I'll speak to Sir Shankapani Prabhu and other people in the team, and we'll resume the homework assignments. I know we have already 9 chapters to cover up. We'll spread it in a manner so that it doesn't become an overload and overdose of homework assignments as well. And maybe in 2 weeks' time, we'll come a real time with the chapter that we'll be studying in going forward.
Okay.
And on the exam front for the nectar of instructions, we'll probably have the exam on the existing set of questions only. We will not be following the Mayapur Institute exam pattern for now, at least for nectar of instruction and nectar of devotion. But as advised and directed by His Grace Vardha Krishna Prabhu, what we will do is, we wanted to do that over the previous 2 weeks, that we could discuss those question papers in these sessions. But somehow due to other engagements, we could not do that. But we will set up 1 or 2, let's say, special classes to discuss both the open book and the closed book question bank itself, so that the whole team, all the participants are having a good understanding of the questions and the way we can answer them. And then we will schedule it maybe in 2 or 3 weeks' time on the NOI. And by then we'd also be completing NOD, because only 19 chapters of NOD is what is a part of our curriculum for Bhakti Shastri. And then probably a similar approach will also apply for NOD exams as well. So
Okay,
this is where we stand.
Okay, bro.
That's all from my side announcement. Achyut Prabhu, you have anything to say?
Nothing else from my side, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
And thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful weekend in the next week.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Rasin
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Thank you very much.
We are very, very happy. Thank you, bro. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.